stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners, as well as regular radio listeners. My name is Jerome, and I am the Sane Environmentalist. Today's show is going to be, first we're going to start off, and I want to talk again. Yesterday, Lonnie and I talked on my show about the new FCC filing, which they call Restoring Internet Freedom, which is basically designed to eliminate Title II regulations from the internet service providers. And what Title II did was it created the internet as a telecommunications service. And as a telecommunications service, like the phone, they can't throttle it, tap it, control it. They can only provide it. So as soon as you remove that and create that basically as a more not a communication service, but as a broadcast service, more or less, then they can This is crazy. All right. I don't know if I'm on or not. I'm extremely confused at this point. But it looks like I'm on. So, isn't it amazing how I started talking about the ISPs and their evil ways, and all of a sudden Skype got disconnected? I'm assuming that I'm online now. I should actually go to ucy.tv and see if I can hear myself talk. If I can, then I know I'm online. All right, good. So, folks, I'm so sorry about that delay. I can honestly say that's not my fault. I was bopping along, and all of a sudden, boom, disconnected. And then I tried to call back, and boom, no answer. Oh, okay, so the ISP dropped on the other end. Funny how that happened, isn't it? So at any rate, what I was saying is that the Restoring Internet Freedom action is going to allow the internet service providers to more or less destroy internet openness by filtering, requiring subscriptions for websites, which we now enjoy on a regular basis, and overall creating a closed internet, not an open internet. So we need to stop this. We need to do something about it. And the action that they're calling it the Restoring Internet Freedom Act. It's 17-108. And if you go to gofccyourself.com, that is a link that was created to bypass all of the first, second, and third steps that the FCC has put into place to keep people from easily commenting. Then you can leave a comment. The link again is gofccyourself.com. That's gofccyourself.com. It'll take you to an FCC page, and you'll see it says proceedings, and you'll see where it says Restoring Internet Freedom, and if you go to the right of that, there'll be a little blue word with a plus sign next to it that says Express. And if you do that, then you can create a comment. They require you to put your name, contact email, your address, city, state, zip, and then you can put a comment. However, I did this yesterday, and I was not required to put any sort of or do any sort of confirmation. I did get a confirmation email from the FCC to say that yes, your comment has been posted. So you can literally put any name, address, and email in there, and the FCC will get your comment. So to protect our internet, protect sites like ucy.tv, which will be among the first to go down and get hit. We need to tell the FCC to keep their dirty, little, slimy, money-grubbing hands off of our open and free internet. Without the internet, we as environmental activists will lose probably what is our biggest, most important tool. Without the internet, I could not do my job here. Couldn't do it. I need the internet, and I need the availability of the information that is available on the internet. So at any rate, without further ado, let us move to our first action or issue that I wanted to cover. And this is going to be the Keystone Pipeline and the recent 210,000 gallon spill that occurred on this pipeline. TransCanada is running tests on the pipeline after this 210,000 gallon spill, and state regulators fear a risk of wider damage, and they could still revoke the permit for the pipeline. South Dakota regulators are worried that a construction problem suspected in the recent pipeline oil spill could mean other sections of the pipeline and the state's groundwater are at risk. Keep in mind, this is literally the filthiest oil on the planet. I encourage each and every one of you to go to YouTube and look for tar sands oil, okay, and see how they mine this stuff. It is filthy, and very destructive to the environment in Canada as well. You know, they scoop up this oily sand, and then they have to boil it with all kinds of stuff to extract the oil out of the sand. And the oil that comes out of the sand is very, very dirty, very thick, sticky, almost impossible to clean up oil. So the state regulators have reiterated their right to shut this pipeline down after federal inspectors suggested the company is likely to blame. A preliminary assessment from the Federal Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration suggested that damage that occurred during the TransCanada Corporation's construction of the pipeline was likely the cause of the spill. TransCanada shut down the pipeline, which transports 590,000 barrels of tar sand crude oil and other forms of crude oil per day from Alberta, Canada to U.S. refineries after the leak was detected on November 16th. The leak, which spilled an estimated 5,000 barrels of oil, was the third major spill from the pipeline in or near South Dakota since the pipeline began transporting oil in 2010. They started putting oil through the pipeline Tuesday, again, after the PHSMA gave TransCanada the conditional green light to resume operations at roughly 80% capacity as part of a corrective action order sent to the company on Tuesday. The order finds that continued operation of the affected segment without corrective action is, or would be, hazardous to life, property, or the environment, and requires TransCanada to take immediate action to ensure its safe operation. Alan Mayberry, PHSMA's Associate Administrator for Pipeline Safety, wrote that the order states that a weight placed on top of the pipeline to prevent buoyancy concerns floating in areas where standing water during construction was likely to blame. Preliminary information indicates that the failure may have been caused by mechanical damage to the pipeline and coating associated with the weight installed on the pipeline in 2008. The finding raised additional concerns for state regulators. Gary Hansen, Vice Chairman of the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission, said that he is anxious about the future operation of the pipe and the potential for future leaks. His main concern is that if damage was caused by the weight in one location, similar damage could have been caused if weights were used elsewhere. He said if this is a standard installation procedure for installing the weights, they may have created challenges, quote unquote, in other locations of the pipe. Groundwater moves into this area and out of this area. Obviously, TransCanada recognizes that because they put weights on the pipe. It concerns him as to the future leaks and the potential for damage in groundwater. Brian Walsh, scientific manager with the South Dakota Department of Environment and Natural Resources, said that there is some shallow groundwater present at the spill site and that TransCanada will have to evaluate and mitigate this as needed. PHSMA's order noted that TransCanada has recently sent electronic leak detection equipment through the pipeline, including past the leak point, but that equipment did not detect any signs of a leak or a potential for a leak, and that was right before the spill occurred. TransCanada officials said they are complying with all terms of the corrective action to ensure the integrity of the pipeline. Quote, "We will continue to ensure we are responsive to direction from both federal and state regulators as we complete our investigation and cleanup effort," Terry Kuna, the company spokesman, said. As part of the order, the company must analyze available data and conduct additional tests within 120 days, looking for signs of potential failures in other areas where wastes were used. TransCanada has removed the damaged portion of the pipe and replaced it. The damaged section is being sent to the National Transportation Safety Board lab in Virginia for metallurgic testing. While a precise cause for the pipe failure remains unknown, Carl Weimer of the Pipeline Safety Trust said the weight may have damaged the pipe's outer coating, allowing corrosion to create a failure, or it may have damaged a weld point connecting two lengths of pipe. Hansen, who is one of the 3 public utilities commissioners for South Dakota, said he will wait to make a final decision on how to proceed until after the PHMSA completes its investigation into the cause of the spill. Federal and state permits for the pipeline were issued by the PHMSA and the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission. State regulators have previously said that if TransCanada was found to be at fault for the spill, they might revoke the company's permit for the pipeline. So I encourage all of my listeners, especially if you live in the Dakotas, to get a hold of the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission and encourage them to revoke this permit for this pipeline, especially this individual Hansen. Hansen reasserted that the Commission's authority to revoke the permit, but added that such a measure would more than likely come from the PHMSA. We do not have the authority to revoke their permit for operation. However, it is unlikely that we would get to that point, he said. Man. The 7-year-old pipeline that was damaged is part of a larger pipeline system owned by TransCanada. The company won the key approval from Nebraska regulators last week to build its long-contested Keystone XL pipeline extension, though not on the company's preferred route. The project faces several challenges, including low oil prices, legal challenges, and pushback from Native American communities. So we need to resist this. Now let's go on to this wonderful, wonderful thing coming out of Russia. Ruthenium. That's a substance most of us have never heard of before. So Russia's meteorological service said on Tuesday it had measured pollution of a radioactive isotope nearly 1,000 times normal levels in the Ural Mountains. The first official Russian data supporting reports that the accident had taken place. This data appears to support the report by a French Nuclear Safety Institute, which said on November 9th that a cloud of radioactive pollution over Europe had indicated that an accident must have taken place at a nuclear facility, either in Russia or Kazakhstan, in the last week of September. Neither Russia nor Kazakhstan has acknowledged any accident. Russian State Weather Service Roshydromet said in a statement that it found extremely high pollution of ruthenium-106 in samples from 2 meteorological stations in the South Ural Mountain regions in late September and early October. At the Agriash weather station, the levels were 986 times those of the previous month, while at the Novogorny station, they were 440 times higher. The Weather Service did not rule out that the radioisotope could be absorbed into the atmosphere and reach Europe. The Agriash weather station is located about 30 kilometers from Mayak, a huge plant that reprocesses nuclear fuel and produces radioactive materials for industrial research purposes. It's owned by the Russian state nuclear company Rosatom. Mayak accounts for half of Russia's exports of radioactive isotopes. In a statement, Mayak denied that its plant was the source of the increased levels of ruthenium-106. Rosatom was also quoted by a Russian RIA news agency as saying that there were no accidents at any of its facilities which could increase the level of ruthenium-106 in the atmosphere. Greenpeace said in a statement on Tuesday that it would ask Russia's prosecutor's office to investigate whether there had been an accident in the area. It also demands a check into whether the atmospheric radionuclide monitoring system is sufficiently prepared for possible accidents, and whether public health around a possible release of ruthenium-106 was sufficiently protected, the environmental group said in a statement. France's IRSN ruled out the possibility of an accident in a nuclear reactor, saying the material it detected was more likely to have been released from a nuclear fuel treatment site, or center, for radioactive medicine. The pollution would not be sufficient to cause an impact on human health or the environment in Europe, this French institute said. I guess Libby Halevi would say, nuclear numbnuts of the week. I give the French's IRSN nuclear numbnuts of the week, saying that radiation 400 to 900 times higher than normal could not be sufficient cause for an impact on human health or environment in Europe. So basically they're just blowing it off. And now let's move on to Fukushima. 7 years after the disaster, people are moving back in, and it is a very, very sad situation. Basically, they're growing food in their gardens, and they're eating it, and it's mostly older people. A lot of the younger people refuse to return. And because they refuse to return, they're losing their government benefits that they got after they evacuated. And so the Abe government, who has turned out to be extremely evil, really evil, is just more or less saying, you go back, it's safe now, move along, there's nothing to see here. I know that there's 6,000 becquerels per cubic meter of cesium-137 right under the beach sand, for instance. And in Minami Soma, and this is probably a 3 or 4 year old, at least 3 year old report. Minami Soma, which is maybe 15, 20 kilos north of Fukushima, where people are living again. They're all moved back in. There's a black substance they keep finding, and this black substance has between 600 and 700,000 becquerels or disintegrations per second going on, and they don't know whether it's some sort of a fungus or a mold or moss maybe, but it's black stuff, and they keep finding it outside of schools and other public institutions, and the Japanese government is running around scooping it up and cleaning it up. That's a euphemism right there. And basically, if you look at the plume map from Fukushima and look and see where Minami Soma is, you will see that the plume went directly north and deposited some of the heaviest radio fallout right over this area, right over that whole area. And so yeah, they're basically being forced to move back into highly radioactive areas, where there are pockets of this substance everywhere you look. And their children are in there, and keep in mind, children are thousands of times more susceptible to damage from radiation poisoning than adults are. And women are hundreds of times more susceptible to damage from radiation poison than men are. And fetuses are hundreds of thousands of times more susceptible to radioactive damage than even a born child is. So honestly, it's not looking good for the people of Japan. And I encourage all my listeners to go to Google Earth and find Fukushima on the map, the power plant. It's real easy to spot because it's just a mess. It's a big gray black area in the middle of this green area. And go around the countryside and just kind of zoom in and look. And everywhere that it looks like there's like little farm plots and stuff, if you look closely, you'll see that this isn't farm plots. This is bag farms. Everywhere you look, there's farms that have tens and hundreds of thousands of bags full of contaminated debris, topsoil and whatnot. And it looks like they put down a little bit of asphalt maybe, and then they throw the bags on top of that, and then they bury them. And so it looks, after a while, because grass and stuff are growing back, like, oh, look at that, it's just farm fields, but it isn't. It used to be farm fields. It used to be places where people grew their food. Not anymore. So I would say that whole area, all the way from, let's say, 20 miles south of Fukushima to 50 miles north of Fukushima, is all highly radioactive bags of soil that in the event of another tsunami would just wash right out into the ocean. But yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and everywhere you look, it looks like a grid pattern. And you think, oh, it just looks like soil, but then you zoom in a little bit and you see that no, every single square foot of available land has been taken up to bury these bags of contaminated topsoil. Even some of the farms around here are loaded up with bags of topsoil. So, poor people of Fukushima. And that leads me to want to talk about San Onofre power plant. I've had Donna Gilmore on my show. Donna Gilmore is a wonderful lady, very smart lady. And she talks about her biggest concern right now is the spent fuel storage casks that they're employing. And these spent fuel storage casks are 5/8 inch thick stainless steel containers inside of a concrete overpack filled with used fuel rods. And they are hot still. Many of them very hot. And they've got those within a half a football field distance of the high tide line on the Pacific Ocean. So if there's ever a major earthquake, that never happens in California, right? And a tsunami, that could literally wash these things right out to sea, or get in there, and if they're really hot, crack them, because stainless steel will crack if you cool it too quickly. We're talking microfractures, but still, that's all it takes is a microfracture to start letting cesium and stuff out. And that's completely unsafe, unacceptable. We need to get online with a specific, I'm not sure, PG&E is the name of the power company that manages that. But we need to get online with PG&E and let them know that they cannot be doing that. You can go to sanonofriesafety.org. That is her site, or just Google San Onofre Safety, and she has handouts and flyers and other things that action points that you can do that will allow you to help take some action, in regards to this. So, and another thing about decommissioning power plants, which concerns me really greatly, is that so they're basically, they've shut down reactor 1 and 2 at San Onofre, and because of the disastrous steam tube issues that they had when they had Fuji Heavy Industries build the steam tube generators, the steam generator tubes, which leaked, and so they had to shut it down, and now they're moving all of the spent fuel, quote unquote spent fuel, from the fuel pools into these dry cast storage facilities. And the only problem, and Arnie Gunderson pointed this out, the only big problem with that is that, especially with these 5/8 inch, really they're a 20-year deal. They're designed them to be good for 20 years. And some of them have been down there, I think 12 or 13 already. But when they're done putting them all in these dry casts, then they're going to dismantle the plant, including the spent fuel pool. And so if in the event, let's say for instance, we have an earthquake and these overpacks for these dry casks crumble and shatter, and the fuel rods inside get damaged, and you've got radioactivity leaking, and these hot fuel rods basically radiating. Now you have no place to put them. The nice thing about a spent fuel pool is the borinated water in the fuel pool blocks radiation. And so that's a big plus. Keeping them in that water not only cools them down and prevents further fissioning, but it also blocks alpha and beta radiation. So as soon as you remove the spent fuel pool, then if you have a problem, what are you going to do? They're too big and too heavy to put on a truck. They're too deadly to get in there and pull the fuel bundles out and do something with them individually. So what are they going to do? I'll tell you what they're going to do. They're going to say goodbye to Ocean Beach, Long Beach, a lot of that area. It's going to be heavily irradiated, up and down the coast. That's the thing about radiation. It doesn't stick around in one spot. It moves around a lot, and it bioaccumulates, and animals pick it up, and they carry it around. It gets into the dust, and the dust blows around. So let's try to stop them from doing this anymore. They need to have some sort of a emergency spent fuel pool in case they have an issue with their dry casks, which they will. And when they do have problems with those dry casks, they need some place to put these fuel bundles that is safe. Not that they can get these casks open because they're welded shut. You can't inspect them, you can't look at them, you can't pull them out of the overpack and check them for cracks. They're just we hope they work, and if they don't, well, Okay, they don't. We don't really have a plan for that. And that is, in a way, one of the biggest fallacies of the nuclear industry is, yeah, we've got a plan to create this stuff, but we don't have a real plan to deal with it afterwards. We haven't thought that far ahead. We've created a product which will be deadly for thousands of generations, but we haven't thought of a way to store that for the thousands of generations necessary. The farthest they've gone out, I think, is with in New Mexico. They've got a 10,000 year deal. You know, their expected longevity for their storage is 10,000 years, and that's not even half of the half-life of plutonium, which is 24,000 years. So, you know, what are we doing? The whole nuclear thing started in about 1945 is when they started producing deadly fission products. And since 1945, we produced thousands, maybe even millions of tons of these deadly fission products, which we still don't have a storage solution for. And so it's been, let's say, 40 to 2017. You can really call that one generation. The people born in the 40s are in their 70s now. So it's one generation. So in one generation, we've produced enough deadly radioactive products to kill every man, woman, and child on this planet 100 times that will be here for the next 1,000 generations. And so in our selfishness, we have produced this. You know, that's basically what it boils down to, is selfishness. You know, like thinking there somehow, you know, I hear the nuclear apologists going, think of all the useful radioisotopes that there are and how useful they are and helpful they are. And, for instance, nuclear medicine. You know, think about the benefits of nuclear medicine and chemotherapy. I did a little research on chemotherapy. Did you know that in 98% of adult cases, chemotherapy is ineffective? It does not help. Did you know that? Most people don't. Most people think that, oh, chemotherapy as a last ditch, that'll get it. Guess what? If you're an adult and you have cancer, which is probably caused by environmental poisoning, that's generally what's going to cause cancer. Or some people have a genetic predisposition to get cancer, and those are unfortunate people, and they will die of cancer. But in the majority of humans, cancer is not an issue. In the 1500s and 1600s, it wasn't a big issue. You know, it wasn't until we started creating these radioactive products and other chemical products with the energy industry. It's all based on the energy industry, you know, including coal. You know, I had a discussion with a nuclear apologist that pointed out that coal produces thousands of tons of radioactive fly ash. And it is radioactive because anytime you pull an element out of the ground and combust it, you don't destroy and combust the radioisotopes that are naturally occurring in that material. You concentrate them, and whatever product you're left over after you've used it for energy has got a higher concentration of radioisotopes than the first startup product that you create. You know, and I talked about in an earlier show the oil industry and how the oil industry, the pipes, and especially in fracking, the pipes that connect the wellhead to the storage tanks and the water in the storage tanks and the drill heads, and they all get this sludge on the inside. It's a very hard sludge. And it gets to the point after use for a year or two where these pieces of equipment become too radioactive for workers to work with them. They literally become radioactive waste, and they have to dispense and destroy of them in ways, which is unfortunate. But it just goes to show you that anytime you pull a product out of the ground, you're going to get some naturally occurring radioactive materials out of the ground. And anytime you concentrate and enhance or use these products, you're going to get what they call TENORM. They actually have an acronym for it. It's technologically, TE, technologically enhanced, NORM, naturally occurring radioactive materials. So that happens. We are, as a result of our need for energy, we are pulling radioactivity out of the ground, and we are intensifying it. You know, and as far as tar sand oil, I'm sure that's even worse than normal oil. You know, because if you think about where it's coming from, that's like where a lot of the, look at a map of, what's the name of it? I can't believe I just forgot the name of it. It is the element that they use in nuclear reactors, and I'm blown away that I cannot remember the name of it. Uranium. Look at a map of where uranium is produced. You know, I'm going to actually do that right this minute. Look under maps. Uranium, oh, now it's giving me an actual address. Can you believe that? Somebody has an address, uranium-235. Toronto, Ontario. Okay. Mega uranium, uranium-1, uranium-308 resources. Okay, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Where are the tar sands? Toronto, Ontario. So don't think that this tar sand oil is not filthy, you know? And don't think that it's not just as bad, if not worse, than regular oil. It's certainly worse than regular oil. And don't let anybody fool you into thinking that there are any good radioisotopes. You know, I believe that we can do magnetic resonance imaging. We don't really even need X-rays anymore. You know, we can get away from anything radioactive. You know, a friend of mine said, well, what about smoke detectors? They need a radioactive element in smoke detectors in order for them to work. How many people would die in fires if it wasn't for smoke detectors? Yeah, a few. How many people get cancer because of the manufacturing process behind those smoke detectors? It's probably 6 one way, half dozen the other. So let's talk about one of those isotopes that I was talking about earlier, ruthenium. Ruthenium-106 is a radioactive form of a rare heavy metal, ruthenium, which is in the platinum group. Ruthenium is produced from the fission or splitting of uranium-235. It's found in spent nuclear fuel and also used in a medicine for cancer radiation therapy, especially for eye and skin tumors. So it may be produced for that. And it's used in radioisotope thermoelectric generators that power satellites. Ruthenium gives off radiation in the form of high-energy electrons called beta particles as it decays into rhodium-106 and then into palladium-106, which isn't radioactive. Ruthenium-106 has a half-life of 373.6 days, or around a year. So if you have a deadly dose of ruthenium, let's say it'll kill you in an hour, near you, a year later, it'll kill you in 2 hours, and a year after that in 4 hours, and you can do the math from there. You know, I have had people go, well, that's not how half-life is done. It means half of it's left. Well, if half of it's left, that means that it's half as deadly. It'll take twice as long to kill you. So, this is all very ugly with the ruthenium thing. So, now, since we're talking about cancer and elements, let's swing over north of San Onofre. I believe it might be south of San Onofre, to the Rocketdyne plant near the on the Santa Susana laboratory site. This is a report from 1999. A study of people living near the Rocketdyne test laboratory shows a 17% higher incidence of lung cancer than expected, finding that California officials knew in 1997 but did not disclose. The report does not identify the cause of the higher disease rate, and its authors said that in addition to pollution from the Santa Susana field laboratories, factors ranging from smog to old age to smoking could explain the higher incidence of lung cancer in the community. So I guess that in a way, Santa Susana is kind of, or those areas they're out of the metro area of Los Angeles. They're right next to it. But they're saying the smog or old age or smoking will give them a 17% higher incidence of lung cancer just around that site. That is part of the nuclear taboo, folks. That is basically government going, well, it could be anything, you know? Yeah, it's a higher rate, and it is coincidentally near the site that is producing cancer-causing radioactive materials. But, you know, with radiation, you know, you can't tell. You just can't tell. You don't know what the deal is going to be. It could be one thing. It could be another thing. Who knows? You know, we're going to say that it's caused by smog. So we need to fight global warming. Global warming causes them to get cancer. It's not radiation. You know, how dare you say radiation, you know, is the cause of that. You know, like in let me look this up real quick. Atoms for Peace. I find myself amazed that I keep finding new information that's old. ATOMS for Peace. This is a government program. Atoms for Peace is the title of a speech delivered by Dwight D. Eisenhower to the U.S. General Assembly. I'm looking for the actual site. All right. To solve the fearful atomic dilemma by finding some way by which the miraculous inventiveness of man would not be dedicated to his death, but consecrated to his life. In his Atoms for Peace, Eisenhower, before the United Nations General Assembly in December 1953, sought to solve this terrible problem by suggesting a means to transform the atom from the scourge into a benefit for mankind. Although not as well known as his warning about the military-industrial complex twice later in his farewell radio television address, President Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace speech embodied his most important nuclear initiative as president. From it sprang the panoply of peaceful atomic programs. And I wish I could find this speech. I think this might be it. I think I might have found it. Atoms for Peace draft. Labeled top secret. Yes, I got it. We got 7 minutes, so I'm going to spend 3 or 4 of them reading this. He says, when Secretary Hammarskjöld's invitation to address this General Assembly on its closing day reached me in Bermuda, I was just beginning my conference with the Prime Ministers and Foreign Ministers of Great Britain and France on some of the problems that beset our world. During the remainder of the Bermuda Conference, I had constantly in mind, and ahead of me lay a great honor. This honor is mine tonight as I stand here, privileged to address the General Assembly of the United States. Never before in history has so much hope for so many people been gathered together in a single organization. Your deliberations and decisions during these somber years have already realized some of this hope. But the great tests and the great accomplishments that still lie ahead, and in confident expectation of these accomplishments, I would use the imminence upon which, for a time being, this is literally a draft of the speech. You should, it's in the EisenhowerArchives.org. I wish I could leave links in this show. Okay, the United States on a blank. The United States set off the world's first atomic test explosion in New Mexico. Since that fateful day, the atomic age has moved forward at such a pace that today I consider that certain facts should be taken out of the realm of conjecture and stated officially. I beg you to believe that the facts I shall reveal concerning the atomic power of the United States are not presented boastfully or truculently or threateningly. On the contrary, I, who know better than most the language of destruction, utter them with somber sadness. This recital of atomic danger and power is necessarily stated in the United States terms, for these are incontrovertible facts which I know. You must, however, bear in mind that no area of the world, no matter how remote, can consider itself completely immune to some of the results where atomic warfare can occur on our planet. Today, our mass of atomic weapons, which is ever increasing annual growth, exceeds by many times the explosive equivalent of the total of all bombs and all shells that came from every American plane and every American gun in every theater of war throughout all the years of World War II. Any single one of our air wings of our Strategic Air Command could deliver in one operation atomic bombs with an explosive equivalent greater than all the bombs that fell on Germany through all the years of World War II. So I think this is where he decided that we can so basically he's saying this is his way of saying that we need to use atomic energy for peaceful purposes. If you can believe it. Atomic energy for peaceful purposes. That's how it started, 1954. The Atoms for Peace program created the nuclear power industry. And boy, did they go forward with that. And so thank you, Mr. Eisenhower, for providing the stimulus which created the mess that we have today. It's a real ugly situation, folks. You know, Atoms for Peace is a misnomer at best because, yeah, there's peace. There's very low percentage chances of a nuclear war breaking out, but the waste products that were created by that program are unleashing another kind of war against the citizens of all these various countries. You know, like the ruthenium thing, and that comes from the reprocessing of spent nuclear fuel, you know, for quote unquote medical purposes or industrial purposes, you know, or shooting into space. They've been shooting this stuff into space, apparently. I know they use plutonium in some of their satellites as a heat source to keep them from freezing, and also as a source of a way to boil water, because plutonium will boil water. So we're sending it into space too. So, if, you know, in 1,000 years, some alien culture or lands on a planet that might have some life in it and explodes, then we'll be responsible for the death of that planet as well. So I guess with all that said, it's time to about wrap this up. My name is Jerome, and I am the Sane Environmentalist. And please